Welcome back to the channel. Today we have some dark drone stories that are sure to make your spine tingle. Each of these dark drone stories features a different person, each in their own dire situation. As you listen, I want you to think, would I survive? Before we get into each dark drone story, I wanted to remind you that if you get scared by these stories, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about what you would have done. Now, let's get started with the first dark drone story. Dark drone story number 1, They Swarm in the Pines. They first appeared in pine barrens at dusk, silent drones, gliding above the treetops. At first, no one thought much of it. Probably some tech company testing new gadgets. People in the small town of Wharton shrugged, but the drones didn't leave. Amy first noticed them while jogging on the edge of the forest. A sleek black drone with flashing red lights hovered 20 feet above her, mimicking her movements. When she stopped, so did it. She laughed nervously, waving at it. "Creepy," she muttered, jogging faster. But when she reached the trailhead, another drone appeared. Then another. By the time Amy reached her car, 5 of them buzzed in a loose circle around her. No sound but the hum of their rotors. She slammed the door and sped home, heart pounding. The next morning, the town was abuzz, not with drones, but with fear. Tom, the mailman, had gone missing. His truck was found on a back road near the barrens, engine still running, but no sign of Tom. Amy couldn't shake the feeling that the drones were connected. That night, she peered out her bedroom window. Her breath hitched. 3 of them hovered in her yard, their lights pulsing in sync. The town held an emergency meeting. Theories flew: government surveillance, rogue AI, even extraterrestrial probes. But no one could explain why people kept disappearing. Tom was just the first. By the end of the week, 6 more were gone. Amy decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight and her late father's hunting rifle, she ventured into the barrens. The forest was unnervingly quiet, the usual chirping and rustling replaced by an unnatural hum. She spotted a faint glow ahead and crept closer. In a clearing stood dozens of drones, their lights forming a massive pulsating grid. Beneath them, the missing townspeople knelt in eerie unison, their faces blank, eyes reflecting the red light. "I stepped on a twig." The crack echoed like a gunshot. Instantly, every drone turned toward her, their lights shifting to a blinding white. She ran, weaving through the trees, the hum growing louder, closer. A sharp pain lanced through her ankle, and she stumbled. Turning back, she saw the drones descending, one by one, surrounding her. A voice echoed through the forest, deep and mechanical. "Join the hive." The last thing Amy saw was a sea of red light swallowing her whole. The next morning, the townspeople woke to an eerie silence. The drones were gone, but so was Amy. That's when the news broke. Sightings of silent drones in Pennsylvania. The swarm was spreading. Dark drone story 2, The Silent Offensive. It started with a crash. A sleek black drone fell out of the sky and landed in Rick Howard's backyard in Trenton, New Jersey. Rick, a retired engineer, couldn't resist the urge to tinker. The drone was unmarked, but its components were cutting edge, far beyond anything he'd seen. Inside, he found a strange circuit board with characters etched in Chinese. Rick called his friend Mike, a local tech enthusiast, to help analyze it. Together, they discovered something chilling. The drone wasn't just a surveillance device. It had a weaponized module, something designed to disrupt communications, fry electronics, and, worst of all, target people. Before Rick could report it, his phone buzzed. A warning flashed on the screen. "Cease activity immediately." He dropped the phone, his blood running cold. Who was watching? The next morning, More drones appeared, not just in Trenton but across New Jersey. They hovered above highways, neighborhoods, and parks. At first, they seemed harmless, but soon, people realized they weren't just observing. The first attack came in Edison. A drone descended over a busy intersection during rush hour, emitting a high-pitched screech. Cars stalled, their electronics fried. Panicked drivers tried to escape, but the drone's second wave was far deadlier. It released a pulse of energy that left dozens unconscious. By the evening, towns across the state were under siege. Residents barricaded their homes, but the drones were relentless. They smashed windows, released gas like mists, and emitted sounds that caused nausea and disorientation. Emergency services were paralyzed. The drones targeted their vehicles first. Rick and Mike worked frantically in Rick's basement, trying to hack the fallen drone system. Their theory: the drones were remotely controlled, possibly by a foreign operator. The Chinese characters on the circuit board hinted at their origin. But why New Jersey? Data centers, Mike realized, pointing at a map. New Jersey has some of the biggest data hubs on the East Coast. If these drones wipe out our infrastructure here, it could cripple the entire region. As the two worked, Rick's house was surrounded. Shadows flickered across the windows as drones hovered outside, their lights scanning the walls. The sound of rotors grew deafening. "We're out of time," Rick said, loading the drone with the virus they'd created. "If this works, it'll send a feedback loop to the swarm and shut them down." The drones outside began breaking in. One smashed through the basement window, its camera locking onto Rick. Without hesitating, he activated the hacked drone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the attacking drones froze mid-air, their lights flickering. The virus was working, but the victory was short-lived. The hacked drone emitted a final message, in a cold, mechanical voice: "Phase 1 complete. Phase 2 commencing." Rick and Mike barely had time to react before the house exploded in blinding light. The next day, the drones were gone. News outlets reported similar attacks in other states, each linked to critical infrastructure. Officials called it an act of cyber warfare, but the truth was far worse. The final broadcast from Rick's basement revealed what no one wanted to admit: this wasn't a test, it was an invasion. Dark Drone Story Number 3, The Eyes Above. Lena always hated the Pine Barrens. Even as a kid, the sprawling woods felt alive, like something was watching. After moving back to her hometown of Barnegat, she avoided the forest whenever she could. But when her dog, Max, bolted into the woods one night, she had no choice. She grabbed a flashlight and plunged into the darkness, calling his name. The wind whispered through the trees, but something else was there, a faint, mechanical hum. She told herself it was just the highway in the distance. Max barking led her to a clearing. Her flashlight caught him, his fur bristling, eyes fixed on the sky. Above him, a swarm of drones hovered in eerie silence. Their lights blinked in an unnatural rhythm, almost hypnotic. Lena froze, heart pounding. These weren't hobby drones. They were too sleek, too coordinated. When she moved closer, the drones descended. A sudden piercing sound erupted, forcing her to drop the flashlight and cover her ears. Max whimpered and collapsed. "Max!" Lena crawled to him, shaking him. His body was stiff, unresponsive. The hum grew louder. Lena looked up and gasped. The drones weren't just hovering, they were scanning her, beams of green light crisscrossing her body. She scrambled to her feet and ran, cradling Max in her arms. When she reached her car, she found the windows shattered. The interior was scorched, as if hit by a lightning strike. She turned back toward town, sprinting along the deserted road. Behind her, the hum followed. When she reached the first houses, Relief washed over her. She pounded on her neighbor's door, but no one answered. The entire street was dark, eerily quiet. "Help!" she screamed, her voice echoing. The hum intensified. Drones appeared over the rooftops, dozens of them. They swarmed toward her, faster now. One swooped low, and Lena ducked just in time to avoid a bladed rotor. She fled into the nearest house, slamming the door shut. It wasn't her neighbor's home. It was an abandoned shack, its windows boarded up. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and decay. She huddled in the corner, clutching Mac's limp body. Her phone buzzed. She fumbled to check it, hands trembling. A text appeared, "No escape." She dropped the phone. A loud crash echoed upstairs, followed by the mechanical whine of a drone. "They're inside," she whispered to herself. Footsteps sounded above, human footsteps. Then, a voice. Deep, distorted, and not quite human. "Target acquired." Lena's breath hitched. She bolted for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The footsteps grew louder. The hum was deafening now, a symphony of dread. Through the cracks in the boards, she saw the drones circling, but they weren't alone. Shadows moved outside, figures with glowing red eyes, walking in unison. The footsteps stopped just outside the room. The doorknob turned. The last thing Lena saw was a single drone hovering before her face. Its camera extended, locking onto her eyes. She didn't scream. She couldn't. When the sun rose the next morning, Barnegat was empty. Homes sat untouched, cars parked neatly in driveways. But the town was silent. No birds, no voices, no hum of life. From above, satellites captured an unsettling image, a formation of drones flying west, each carrying a motionless figure. And deep in the Pine Barrens, a new signal beacon pulsed, calling the swarm to grow.